Welcome to the RLH Project's podcast, Love Matters, where we talk about real academic research mixed with real life experiences to hopefully improve the real relationships you have with important people in your life. I'm the founder of the RLH Project and the host of the Love Matters podcast, Dr. Jenny Rosier. I'm also an associate professor of communication studies at James Madison University, a wife to my favorite person on the planet, a mother of 4 young children, and an all-around love enthusiast. As an expert in romantic and parent-child relationships, I've dedicated my life to figuring out how individuals can use communication to live happy, healthy lives connected to other people. I hope that this podcast can help you. Hello, friends! This is the first season of the RLH Project's podcast, Love Matters. For season 1, I've decided to do an in-depth 12-episode explanation of a single concept that impacts us all, attachment. I actually teach a class at James Madison University in the School of Communication Studies called Attachment Communication, and much of this season's podcast is based on my lectures from that class. And so that's the plan for season 1 of the Love Matters podcast, an in-depth 12-episode explanation of the science of attachment with relevant stories from myself and a ton of cool people I know sprinkled throughout. Lucky for you, I'm not just offering a podcast to help you understand attachment. I've also created a 60-page digital workbook that you can purchase through the link in my Instagram bio at Relationships Love Happiness or on my website, www.relationshipslovehappiness.com. This digital workbook not only complements the podcast, but it also includes extra attachment tips and information not covered in the podcast, and includes self-reflection prompts throughout that will encourage you to dig deep and reflect on your own past and current life experiences. Before you start listening to this episode, get yourself a copy of the Attachment Matters digital workbook. You won't regret it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter what time it is, no matter where you are, I'm so thankful that you're spending your time with me. Today, in episode 8, I'm going to talk about anxious, preoccupied attachment. Specifically, this episode will give you a deep understanding of what anxious attachment entails, where it comes from in childhood, and what you can say, do, and avoid if you or your partner has anxious attachment. If you're following along in the Attachment Matters digital workbook, we're still on chapter 6. I want you to imagine that you're in a new romantic relationship. Everything seems like it's going really well. You actually really like this new person, and you want to spend all of your time with them. Things are exciting, and you have butterflies in your stomach, and you're just really kind of falling for them. But sometimes when you talk to them, you might fixate on things that they say. Maybe they self-disclose that they like a certain kind of music. And you then start to wonder if you guys can be together because you don't like that kind of music. And maybe you worry and you think, oh, well, we have to like the same kind of music. Maybe this isn't going to work. Or maybe your partner says something and you didn't understand what they meant. And so you start to worry that what they said is their subtle way of telling you that they don't like you or that it's not going to work out. The relationship moves on a little bit and you guys have talked about your lives and things that you like to do, and you've shared a lot about who you are to this person. You're putting your best foot forward. You're trying really hard to be the kind of person that you think this new partner would like. But you're questioning if the other person likes you the whole way. Let's say that the relationship moves forward and you start to get a little serious. You get exclusive, you call each other boyfriend and girlfriend, and things start to get, just a little more serious. But even though things are getting more serious and you are really liking this new person, you still probably have some fears that it's all going to come crashing down at some point. You could also have fears that your partner is going to leave you, or that your partner is judging you, or that your partner is not accepting you for who you are. Sometimes these fears can be minimal or might only be triggered when your partner says or does certain things. Other times, these fears could be all consuming, and you could be thinking about them frequently or even expressing them to your partner frequently. Many times, this expression of attachment anxiety comes in the form of jealousy. You might ask your partner why they're going somewhere, or who they're going with, or what they're going to do when they get there. And it can be pretty off-putting to a relationship partner. Not only do you have fears of abandonment or acceptance or judgment, but like I said earlier, you are overanalyzing lots of things that your partner says and does. And sometimes you're seeing things that might not actually be there. And this could sabotage your relationship. It could impact your communication in a way that is off-putting to your relationship partner. And what is really interesting about this dynamic is that your biggest fear is to offend or upset your partner, yet the way that you are communicating those fears have the potential to upset or offend your partner. If you haven't figured it out yet, the individual that I am describing in this scenario has an anxious, preoccupied attachment. As I said a couple of episodes ago, attachment anxiety and attachment avoidance combine to create an adult's attachment style. These two concepts, attachment anxiety and attachment avoidance, are on a continuum. And so some people have really high attachment avoidance and some people have really low attachment avoidance. Most of us fall somewhere in the middle. Same with anxiety. Some of us have really high attachment anxiety while others have really low attachment anxiety, but most of us fall somewhere in the middle. Individuals with high attachment anxiety and low attachment avoidance are known as anxious preoccupied. Some researchers might just call them anxious. I tend to call them, or just preoccupied. I tend to call them anxious preoccupied to make sure it's really clear. Before I get into breaking down the anxious preoccupied attachment style, let's listen to my friend Matt. He's 21, single, and getting ready to graduate from college.
I always want to feel loved. That's something that I've been kind of struggling with recently, especially in the pandemic. I like talking to people. I'm an extrovert. Just having someone to text to all day or Snapchat or talk to ever so often has been hard for me. And that's why I always try to gravitate to like making things into romantic relationships rather than just settling for friendship. So that's something that I've kind of been struggling with. So I'm constantly thinking whenever I'm starting to talk to a new girl, I'm always like, oh my gosh, what are they thinking about me? Like, just everything is running through my mind at once, and it gets really annoying, and I kind of just snowball and snowball and snowball, and then all comes out at once. And it overwhelms them, it scares them. They're like, this is too much, he's too into it, blah, 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 blah. Friend zone.
The idea that Matt talked about, being consumed by these fears about what the other person thinks about them, or snowballing after the other person might say something that they didn't expect, or they didn't like, or they were confused about, is really indicative of an anxious, preoccupied attachment. So, what does anxious, preoccupied attachment look like? I want to be really clear when I say that everyone feels attachment anxiety at some point. Even the most secure person might feel attachment anxiety after their partner says or does something that triggers that small amount of attachment anxiety that they have. So, if you feel attachment anxiety, it does not mean that you have this attachment style. Individuals who are anxious, preoccupied are oftentimes consumed by their attachment anxiety. And remember earlier I said that all of this is based on a continuum. So the examples that I'm going to give, the descriptions that I'm going to give in this episode are of people who are very anxious, preoccupied. You could have anxious, preoccupied tendencies. So you could have one of the other attachment styles and just have anxious tendencies. Or you could have moderate anxious, preoccupied attachment, or you could have full blown anxious, preoccupied attachment. I just want to be really clear when I say that it's on a continuum and that everyone feels attachment anxiety at some point. So let's get to some of those descriptions. As I mentioned, an anxious, preoccupied individual tends to experience high anxiety and low avoidance. They typically want intimacy in romantic relationships, but can often become really dependent on their romantic partner. They can also become obsessive, which I've alluded to several times already, when they're in a relationship. They typically have a really strong desire for approval from their mates and can get worried about their partners abandoning them, judging them, or accepting them. Anxious, preoccupied adults tend to have a low opinion of themselves. I'm not that great. Not many people would like me. I'm not a good relationship partner. And a high opinion of others. Other people are awesome. Other people are really great. I better find one of those people and trick them into liking me before they figure out how awful I really am. They tend to be really comfortable sharing their emotions, and they might even overshare in order to increase that relational intimacy faster than the norm. When they're in relationships, anxious, preoccupied adults can easily become jealous. They could make seemingly constant requests for a partner's help with tasks or for emotional comfort, and they could excessively make requests for hugging and or kissing. They might want to be physically around their partner as often as possible, and they could focus a lot of their energy on gaining approval from their partner. So they might do things to overserve their partner because they are concerned that their partner is judging them or not liking them. So sometimes this desire and this energy that they spend gaining approval from their partner is at the expense of their own desires and values. Anxious, preoccupied individuals tend to be really self-reflective, though, which is really great. They typically put a lot of effort in performing well and improving themselves. So an anxious, preoccupied person wants to be better. And so that is really a super strong, positive aspect of having anxious, preoccupied attachment. Unfortunately, they might also doubt themselves and feel like they're just not good enough in romantic relationships, in the workplace, with their family, with their friends, at school. They tend to self-sacrifice and take care of other people. So this is many times seen as a positive thing. They might be viewed as really giving or really compassionate individuals. They have a difficult time with rejection or criticism, even if there are good intentions behind the criticism. They often get clingy and, like I said, jealous in relationships. And this is not only the case in romantic relationships. This might happen in their platonic relationships as well. Like I said, they might overthink and overanalyze things that most people would think are insignificant. I talked about earlier that they might fixate on something that other individuals might view as insignificant, but they are overanalyzing. What do you think he meant when he said this? Well, she did A, B, and C. What do you think that means? Oh my gosh, it means they don't like me. It means, and it's a spiral of negativity, very frequently a spiral of negativity. Dr. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller wrote a book called Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment, and how it can help you find and keep love. I talked about this book in the last episode, and I'll put the link to this book in the show notes for this episode. Attachment in adulthood is really about this desire that people have, some more than others, to feel safe and secure in relationships with other people. In their book, Levine and Heller talk about these behaviors that anxious, preoccupied adults enact when they're trying to achieve that level of comfort. So, that comfort zone, that feeling of safety and security. And so, they divide these behaviors into two main categories, and one of them is called activating strategies. And these are thoughts and feelings that compel or cause an anxious, preoccupied adult to seek closeness with their partner. So these are things that could sometimes fuel those feelings of anxiety, which in turn cause a anxious, preoccupied adult to really try to become closer to a partner. As Levine and Heller explain, once that attachment anxiety is activated, an anxious, preoccupied adult is oftentimes consumed with thoughts that have a single purpose: to reestablish closeness with their partner. And these things, like I said, are called activating strategies. And once your partner, so if you have this feeling and you engage in one of these activating strategies, then your partner responds to you in a way that reestablishes security, you can revert back to your calm, normal self. If your partner does not respond in a way that reestablishes security, the anxiety really can get out of hand. In order to really talk about these activating strategies, I'd like to go through a scenario that's actually described in Levine and Heller's book. And I just think that it is so well laid out. And it's so common to happen in almost all romantic relationships at some point. Imagine you're in a romantic relationship and you have anxious, preoccupied attachment. One day your partner doesn't call you. So you're used to talking to your partner every day and they don't call you. Now, for many people who don't have attachment anxiety, they might wonder, is something wrong? But their response is probably, oh no, there's probably nothing wrong. They probably just weren't able to get in touch with me today because they're busy or whatever. An anxious, preoccupied individual might start to activate their attachment system because this not calling is a trigger of some kind. It's a sign of a potential threat. And so we go from, my partner didn't call today. Is there something wrong? Well, maybe they're angry with me. I know what I'll do. I'll invite them to a romantic dinner. That'll make things really great. So you might text them to say, hey, let's go out to dinner tonight. Then they don't call you back or answer your text. Okay, this is where, again, we could have two different reactions to this. Let's say that you've invited them to dinner and they don't answer your text. So you might start to wonder, will they ever call you back? Will they ever answer your text message? Some people might think, oh, yeah, of course they will. And if your partner then calls you maybe from a landline, said, oh, my cell phone was dead, sorry, yeah, let's go to dinner tonight, then you, as the anxious, preoccupied person, can get back to some normalcy. And you're like, oh, my confidence in this relationship is restored. But let's say that they don't call you back and a little bit of time goes by, they don't text you back. You might start to freak out a bit. Oh my goodness, they didn't call me back. They didn't text me. Maybe they're leaving me. Maybe they don't want to be in a relationship with me anymore. So we've gone from my partner didn't call me like they typically do to maybe they're angry with me, to let me invite them for dinner. Oh my gosh, they're still not calling me back. Maybe they're ready to leave me. So it's that snowball effect. It's the idea that something goes wrong, and while some relationship partners might look at that as something minor or insignificant, an anxious, preoccupied person would likely fixate on it, and things go from not so great to dire, right? So it goes from, oh my gosh, he's not calling me or she's not calling me right now, to they're going to leave me. They're cheating on me. Our relationship is over. And we can go from that 0 to 60 very fast, especially if during that snowballing, there's no reassuring. So there's no texting back. There's no calling and leaving a message. There's nothing that reassures the anxious, preoccupied mind that everything's okay. And so activating strategies are any of the behaviors that a person does to try to get close physically and or emotionally with their partner again, to try to get back to a feeling of safety and security, to try to get back to a certain level of comfort. Along with activating strategies, there is another group of behaviors that Levine and Heller call protest behaviors. And these are used typically by someone who has anxious, preoccupied attachment when they're not being reassured. So if we went back to the example that I just talked about, the partner continues to not call, or when they do finally call, they don't say that they're sorry for not calling, or they don't reassure the partner that they love them or they want to be with them. They just act like things are normal and there's no real attachment security being communicated to the anxious, preoccupied adult. So when that happens, or things could just escalate too, like the person could just continue to not call and then the next day comes and the next day comes. So when an anxious, preoccupied person is triggered with some kind of behavior from their partner that they perceive as a threat, and things don't get worked out, they might let their attachment system get the best of them. And when this happens, they often engage in one or more of the following protest behaviors. One of them is keeping score. So this might be where an anxious, preoccupied adult might try to kind of punish their partner for doing something that upset them. So your partner didn't call you back for 6 hours. So the next time that they text you, you don't call them back or you don't text them back for 6 hours. And so you play this little keeping score punishment game with them, except they don't know that they're playing the game. You're the only one who knows. Or maybe a anxious, preoccupied adult might act distant during the time that they are like waiting for their partner to apologize for not calling back or for doing whatever behavior they're upset about that's giving them anxiety. So instead of saying, hey, I was feeling really anxious when you didn't call me back, they might just ignore their partner and act distant until their partner gets a clue and apologizes, like initiates a makeup. And so this is the idea of keeping score. This is a really common behavior for anxious, preoccupied adults to engage in. Another one is acting hostile. So in conflict, rolling your eyes when your partner speaks to you, looking away, getting up and leaving the room while they're talking, just any kind of hostility, especially during conflict. A really common one, and I think that lots of people have experienced this protest behavior, is excessively attempting to reestablish contact. So the person's not calling you back and you text them 43 times, or you call 43 times, or you look all over their social media to see where they are and what they're doing, and you try your hardest to reestablish contact. This could even mean that you go as far as driving to where you think they are and either pretending like you're running into them or literally going to their house and knocking on their door to see what they're doing and why they're not calling you back. So this can be very off-putting to a relationship partner, but in the mind of an anxious, preoccupied person, it's the only way that they can downregulate their stress is to reestablish contact. So to them, it doesn't seem excessive because their mind is snowballing in this anxiety storm, and they need to do whatever they can to help it calm down, to help their stress dissipate. They might also do some kind of manipulation. So acting like they're busy when they're not. Again, this is kind of like what I talked about when we discussed keeping score. It's like a secret punishment that you're giving your partner. Your partner has no idea that you're doing this, but you might say that you have plans when you actually don't, so that you are somehow manipulating your partner to want to be around you or to question why you don't want to be around them. So you're kind of giving them a taste of their own medicine. Another protest behavior is making your partner feel jealous. So maybe you make plans with an ex to make the person feel jealous and you let them know, or you go hang out with people that you know your partner wouldn't really want you to hang out with. Going out for a girls' night or a guys' night and making a really big deal out of it purposefully to upset your partner, or telling your partner about someone who has hit on you, right? So maybe you come home and you say, I got hit on today and they said this and it made me feel great, and just to see what their reaction is. Another protest behavior is threatening to leave. So making threats about leaving the situation, leaving the relationship, saying something like, I'll be better off without you. I knew you weren't really right for me. This isn't working out. The key here, though, is that these are empty threats. The goal of the threat is to hopefully make your partner say, oh, no, we are meant to be. I do love you. I want to keep going. Because the whole time that an anxious, preoccupied person is making these threats, they are crossing their fingers behind their back, either figuratively or literally, hoping that it's going to actually stop you from leaving the relationship. So they're saying these things because they want you to say, no, I love you. I want to be with you. I'm not going anywhere. And so if you were really listening to all of these protest behaviors, they're a bit of a mind game that the anxious, preoccupied person is playing with their partner. Most of these protest behaviors put the relationship in a situation that the other relationship partner doesn't even realize they're in. So you're anxious, preoccupied, and you're keeping score. Your partner doesn't even know you're keeping score. You're anxious, preoccupied, and you're trying to be manipulative. Your partner has no idea that you're trying to be manipulative. You're anxious, preoccupied, and you're threatening to leave when in actuality you don't actually want to leave. You want the opposite effect. Your partner doesn't necessarily know that. And so, as I'll talk about later when I discuss things that you can do if you are anxious, preoccupied, one of the main things you can do is just tell your partner that you're feeling anxious. Saying, hey, I'm feeling really anxious right now because of A, B, and C is much healthier than playing these mind games that your partner doesn't necessarily know you're playing with them. Now that you have a better idea about what anxious, preoccupied attachment looks like and what it entails, I'd like to shift focus a little bit and discuss where it comes from. There's lots of experiences that you can have throughout your life that can cause you to have more or less attachment anxiety and can cause you to be more anxious, preoccupied. I'm going to really focus on those experiences that happen with parents in childhood. So, where does anxious, preoccupied come from if it stems from childhood? It's all about the child's perceptions. Let me repeat that. It's all about the child's perceptions. I often will talk to parents of adult children, and they'll say things like, my child's childhood was amazing. I don't understand how they have a insecure attachment style now as an adult. I never neglected them. I never abused them. I was wonderful. I was a great parent. And they get really, defensive about their parenting. Attachment forms based on a child's perception of their life, not the adult's perception of their life. So that's a tough pill to swallow. It's a tough pill to understand. It is important though. So with anxious, preoccupied adult attachment, it's not always about what the parents did or didn't do. Instead, it's about the child perceiving the parents or parent as unavailable. It's about a child not necessarily feeling loved, enjoyed, delighted in, and understood by their caregivers. It's about a child's needs not being met. And so a lot of times this is not this adult attachment style is not created by parents who were intentionally or maliciously being unavailable. Many times it's simply the parents are misattuned to the child. And then the child grows up feeling like they are not understood by their parent. Many times this is not the parent's fault, right? So maybe a parent doesn't have the tools to be empathetic because of their own childhood, or they just have never tried to fully understand another person's experience. or they are wrapped up in their own life experience, that they just don't have the energy, time, emotional capacity to tend to their child's needs. And so it makes it very difficult for them to become attuned. So they might feel like they get their kid, they might feel like they understand them, but their child doesn't feel understood. Their child doesn't feel like their parent accepts them for exactly who they are. This misattunement can be really dramatic. Like, my parent wanted me to be someone who I wasn't. Like, you consistently felt that way. Like, your parent wanted you to have a certain profession that you didn't want to have, or your parent wanted you to have a certain personality that you didn't have. Your parents stifled you from being the person that you felt like you were. It can be really dramatic and extreme like that, but it could also just be less dramatic on the other side of the continuum. Your parent, often couldn't deal with your high emotions. And so they told you to stop crying. They told you to get over it. They told you to calm down. They told you they couldn't handle your craziness, your upset, and they just couldn't deal with it. And then so they'd say things like, calm down, come on, get over it. And that could cause a child to feel like they're not understood, like they're not accepted, like they're not allowed to be themselves. So it could be misattunement, but it could also be this idea of inconsistent parenting. One time the parent is loving and understanding, and another time the parent is dismissive and minimizing, maybe even mocking a child. So anxious, preoccupied attachment in adulthood is typically developed from a childhood where the child felt misunderstood or unloved or unenjoyed, if that's a word. They didn't feel like their parents enjoyed them. They didn't feel like their parents accepted them. It's usually really insidious. Like I said, it's not this direct neglect or direct abuse, although it could be, but that's not typical. So this misattunement can lead a child to cope by hyperactivating their attachment system. They're actively seeking closeness, care, attention, and love. They often allow others to take advantage of them so that they could feel that love, to feel that attention and affection. They might get frustrated, really frustrated, like overly frustrated when their needs are not met when they're in childhood. And if their parents' reactions to them are inconsistent, they might start to begin over analyzing other people in their lives. And this is where that over analyzing in adulthood comes from. If your parent is inconsistent and 1 minute they're happy with you and another minute they're frustrated with you, and one time when you fell down and hurt your knee, they came and helped you and loved you and nursed you back to health and gave you a Band-Aid and said, poor baby, and cry as long as you want. And then another time when you hurt your knee and fell down, they came over to you and said, ugh, come on, this is not a big deal. It is a very small cut. Can you just get over this? And when there's a pattern of that inconsistent parenting, then of course a child is going to grow up over analyzing what other people say because they can't trust themselves to believe that what they think is happening is what's actually happening, because they thought that whenever they fell down, their parent would come to them in a loving, sensitive way, but that wasn't the case. Sometimes they came in a loving, sensitive way. Sometimes they came in an unloving, insensitive way. And so then when they're in another relationship, a friendship or an adult relationship, romantic relationship later, and their partner says something, they're like, what did they mean? How are they going to react to me saying this? I did say this one thing. So how are they happy with me? Are they sad with me? Are they angry with me? I don't know. I don't know what they are. I am not able to predict other people's behavior. I wasn't able to predict my primary caregiver's behavior. So I'm having a really hard time predicting this friend's behavior or predicting this romantic partner's behavior. Let's listen to my friend Alexandra. She's 22 and an aspiring marriage and family counselor. Here, she's talking about how she felt growing up.
Growing up, my parents were there for me, but they weren't there for me on an emotional level. They said I could talk to them about anything, but I didn't really feel comfortable talking to them, in that if I were crying, they would just tell me to stop crying, or they just didn't sort of understand me and what I was dealing with. They said they would say kind things that made me feel good. Oh, you're doing great, or this and that. But they would also say things that made me feel bad, like commenting on my behaviors in ways that just didn't really make me feel like they understood me. Such as saying like, Alexandra, you're crazy, or just calm down, or I don't know. And there was a time where I had a best friend who would bully me, and she would lock me out on her deck and then like open the deck door a little bit, and I'd run up to try to escape, and she'd just close it and laugh and like leave me out there. But eventually her brother heard me crying and let me go home. But when I got home and told my parents, they didn't really want to get involved or do anything about it. And so I felt like my parents didn't really protect me or my emotions, and they would just let my friends bully me, and I was submissive, and so I would just let lots of people just walk all over me. And so it was really hard to deal with that growing up.
There are a few things that I heard in Alexandra's story that I want to point out. First, she didn't feel fully understood by her parents. That is one cornerstone of insecure attachment in adulthood, is not feeling fully understood. If you listened to the last episode where I talked about secure attachment in great detail, individuals who grew up feeling fully secure also felt fully understood. A second thing that Alexandra mentioned in her story was that her parents did say nice things to her. And I think that that is really important to point out. They said kind things, they tried to build her up. But unfortunately, it takes 1,000 attaboys to make up for one "you're no good." If you are mocking your child, if you are minimizing your child's feelings, if you are disregarding your child's feelings or likes or dislikes or preferences or anything like that, personality, you have to make up for that with a ton of positive, supportive, loving communication interactions. So for every time that you say, "What is wrong with you?" which let me tell you, I have 4 children, I have 100% said that to them. "What is wrong with you? Why would you pee in my washer machine? Oh my God, what am I going to do with y'all? You're terrible. This is ridiculous." And yes, my eldest child peed in our washing machine that had clean clothes in it because he wanted to see what would happen. If you have said something that is disconfirming like that, if you have made that negative remark at a child, you have to make up for it with a lot of positive remarks. And so Alexandra was talking about how her parents did try to boost her self-esteem. They did say things like, you can come to us and talk to us about anything, but she didn't believe it because it's about the child's perception, not the adults. If you're still listening, you have now listened to me talk about anxious, preoccupied adult attachment for 45 minutes. And some of you are thinking to yourself, well, yeah, this sounds just like me. The hell do I do? Or, yeah, this sounds just like my partner. What the hell do I do? How do I fix this? How do I get better? How do I communicate with them in a way that makes them feel loved and lovable? How do I communicate my anxiety in a way that doesn't push my partner away from me? Lucky for you, I have some ideas. The rest of this episode, I am going to talk about what you can do, say, and what you should avoid if you have anxious, preoccupied adult attachment yourself, and what you can do, say, and what you should avoid if your partner has anxious, preoccupied adult attachment. Let's get started. This is the good stuff. If you feel like you have an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, the first thing that you should do is educate yourself about anxious attachment. There are tons of books out there dedicated to just your attachment style. I will put a couple of them in the show notes of this episode. Another thing you can do is to be self-aware. After you've experienced an anxious moment, some kind of trigger, some kind of threat that happens in your relationship, think really carefully about what might have caused you to feel anxiety. The good news is that anxious, preoccupied adults tend to be really good at being self-aware, really capable at reflecting on their past experiences, and really open to talking about their attachment style or their attachment tendencies. So I'm going to encourage you to do those things. Reflect on your past experiences. Contemplate how your past has molded your current anxieties. And then be open to talking about these things with other people, especially your romantic relationship partner, but also your friends and your family. Figure out ways to calm yourself when you're feeling relational anxiety, whether that means counting and doing a breathing exercise, or standing up and walking around, like getting your blood flowing in your body. Whatever you figure out that you can do to calm yourself down, figure those things out and then do it. Be willing to tell your partner about your anxieties and tell your partner the best ways to help you calm down during distressful experiences. I want you to think for a minute how awesome it would be if everyone knew how to calm everyone else down, especially the important people in their life. Most of the time, we don't even know ourselves, like how we want to, or how we best are able to calm down ourselves. But our partners definitely don't know it. And it takes a lot of trial and error. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of attunement. And so if you figured it out, if you know how you like to get calm in an anxious situation or a distressful experience, tell your partner. Give them the handbook on you, right? I know you've heard people say, kids don't come with a handbook. Nobody comes with a handbook. And everyone is different. How awesome would it be if when you got in a relationship, someone was like, here's my handbook. Here's how to best interact with me. Here are things that make me feel anxious. Here are things that make me feel avoidant. Here are things that make me happy. Here are things that make me sad. And there was very little guesswork that we had to do. That would be awesome. When you figure out these things about yourself, things that trigger your anxiety, you should not only acknowledge them, but share them. Share them with your romantic partner. Another thing you should always do is don't assume that your partner is a mind reader. Those protest behaviors that anxious, preoccupied people love to do are all about assuming that other human beings are mind readers, and they're not. So please don't assume that your partner is a mind reader. Don't assume that your partner will just know that you're angry when you're angry or know that you're upset when you're upset. Try not to take your anxieties out on your partner. Your anxieties are your anxieties. They oftentimes have very little to do with your partner's behavior and a whole lot to do with you. Acknowledge that your anxiety is yours and not likely the result of your partner's behaviors. And I'm going to suggest this to everyone. Seek professional help if you have the means to do so. There are therapists who specialize in attachment. Find them. And if you are able to go to therapy and talk to these attachment research or attachment professionals, attachment therapists, you are going to be way better off than the average person. So here are some things that I think you should say if you have anxious, preoccupied adult attachment. First, you should practice positive self-affirmations. I am worthy of love. I am enough. I am a good person. I deserve to be happy. If you need help, write them down and say them every single morning. There are also companies that make self-affirmation cards. I actually have a set of self-affirmation cards that I have my children read. They're made for kids, but they make adult versions too. I'll put a link to them in the show notes of this episode. And say them to yourself. Pick a new card each day and believe it. Read it and believe it. Another thing you should say, tell your partner that you're feeling anxious when you're feeling anxious. What a novel idea. Say something like, I'm feeling anxious about you starting your new job because, and tell them. That is way better than you trying to make them jealous or avoid them or do some kind of manipulation. Tell them, I'm feeling anxious about this because of this. Another thing you should say is that you should work on giving yourself confidence. I am more than my anxieties, fears, and troubles. I can be okay. I am not defined by my anxious moments and thoughts. I can get through this. You should also tell your partner how to help you. I just need you to tell me you love me. Isn't that what a lot of it is? A lot of times that's all you need. I just need you to tell me you love me. I just need you to tell me that we're in it to win it. I just need you to tell me that you're not going anywhere. That's much better to say to your partner than doing, again, one of those protest behaviors. You could also say something like, I feel less anxious when you look me in the eyes and tell me you're in this for the long haul. Or I want you to hug me tightly when I'm feeling anxious. These are all things that you should tell your partners, that whole handbook idea, right? We give them the handbook on how to be in a relationship with us. We don't expect them to just know. We don't expect them to just be able to figure it out and then get mad at them when they don't figure it out. That's a mind game. We're not going to play mind games anymore. Lastly, if you have anxious, preoccupied adult attachment, there are some things that you should work really hard at avoiding. First, avoid putting yourself down. Avoid being self-deprecating. There is no need for that, but it is very common for someone who has anxious, preoccupied attachment, who has negative views of themselves, to make those comments here and there. Put yourself down, self-deprecate in hopes that someone's going to say, "Oh, no, you're wonderful, you're great." Avoid putting yourself down and avoid self-deprecating. You should also avoid comparing yourself to others. Instead, work on being the best version of you. Be in a competition with yourself, not in a competition with someone else. There's always going to be someone better at lots of different things than you. So work on being the best version of you. You should avoid justifying other people's negative actions if they are not warranted. So a lot of times an anxious, preoccupied individual might be in a relationship with someone who does something really negative, or even there might be like a red flag or a deal breaker even, but the anxious, preoccupied partner justifies those behaviors. If the behavior should not be justified, don't do it. You need to avoid bottling up your emotions. I've said this again and again. Tell your partner, "I'm feeling anxious about blank because of blank." And avoid telling your partner that nothing is wrong if something is actually wrong. Before I start to talk about what you can do if your partner has an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, I want to listen to my friend Bree, who's 25 and has been in a relationship for the past 8 years. 4 of those years they have lived together. Listen to how she talks about how she used to express some of her attachment anxiety in the beginning stages of their relationship.
If he told me that he needed alone time, I would ask him, "Why don't you want to be with me?" Or if he told me that he just wanted to hang out with his friends, I would feel offended because he didn't want to physically be with me. And so it took a very long time for me to realize that when somebody says something like that, or I like to touch a lot. I am for sure a physical touch kind of a person. And so, but when somebody denies me time, or when somebody denies me physical touch, I would feel rejected. I would feel shut out. And I often would tell him, "You don't love me. You don't love me. You don't love me." He's like, "Stop saying that, girl. Like, I just need to be alone for a little bit." And I think, especially in the beginning, I had not learned to enjoy alone time, or even I hadn't even encouraged myself to spend a whole lot of alone time. It was either friends or class or him. Um, so yeah, so I think there was a moment for me when I said, "Oh wait, I think I want to be up his ass because I'm scared that if I'm not up his ass, something is going to happen."
There are 2 main things that I want you to take away from Bree's story. First, she engaged in some not so healthy protest behaviors in the beginning of her relationship. But 2, that she's able to acknowledge what triggers her anxiety, and she has become a lot more self-aware. And that is a vital first step to achieving and feeling more attachment security. What if your partner has an anxious, preoccupied attachment style? How can you communicate with them in a way that helps them downregulate their stress, feel less anxious, and feel more secure. I have some things that you can do, say, and avoid. First, you need to educate yourself about anxious attachment. If you care about this person, if you care about your relationship with this person, educate yourself about their attachment style. You should also listen actively to your partner's relationship needs. When your partner wants to tell you the things that they need to feel safe and secure, put your phone down, close your computer, turn off the TV, turn your body towards them, give them eye contact, and listen actively. You should also be open to talk about your relationship and your partner's feelings about the relationship. Be physically and emotionally present for your partner. You should always try to empathize with their experience by putting yourself in your partner's shoes. Think about how it must feel to feel their anxiety. Arrange your life so that you're able to spend a lot of time together. Your partner wants to spend a lot of time together, and it might be more time than you're used to spending with a partner, but that's okay. You care about this person. You care about this relationship. You really want it to work. So arrange your life so that you're able to spend a lot of time together. Accept that your partner will likely feel anxiety about things you have little to no control over. And include your partner in your life, frequently inviting them to attend events with you, to hang out with your friends, to meet your family. There's also lots of things that you can say if your partner has an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. You should give frequent assurances, things like, I'm here for you, I love you, I'm here for the long haul, or our relationship is amazing because of you. Check in with your partner throughout the day via calling them on the phone or sending them a text, checking in on social media, sending an email. Do all of these things to show that you care. A simple "how's your day going" text goes a really long way with someone who has anxious preoccupied attachment. You should openly express your genuine, that's the key here, it needs to be genuine, long-term and short-term relationship goals. You could say something like, I want to start a family with you. Or something a little more short-term than that, like, I want you to come with me to my sister's wedding in the spring. Expressing your long-term and short-term relationship goals can really help someone feel a lot more secure in the relationship. You could express appreciation. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for working so hard for our family. I love it when you whatever. And as I will suggest for anyone who's in a relationship with anyone, you should emphasize that you are a safe space for them to express all of their emotions and share all of their life experiences with you. We all want that, no matter what our attachment style is. There are a few things that you should avoid if your partner has an anxious, preoccupied attachment. First, avoid belittling their fears, saying things like, you shouldn't be feeling this way, get over it, or you're acting ridiculous. Those are huge triggers for anxious, preoccupied adults. Avoid exploiting their anxieties by using them against your partner to hurt them, embarrass them, or upset them. Avoid ignoring your partner when they try to reach out. Avoid being indirect when there is a relationship problem. And above all else, you should avoid threatening to leave your partner during a disagreement. If you are not actually about to leave your partner, you should never threaten to leave your partner. It should only be said if it is imminent, it is about to happen. We shouldn't be threatening any of our relationship partners, and especially someone who has an anxious, preoccupied attachment, that we are going to just leave at the drop of a hat or the drop of a disagreement. Thank you all so much for joining me for episode 8 of season 1 of the Love Matters podcast. If you're following along in the Attachment Matters digital workbook, this episode went over information from chapter 6. I'd like to give a special thanks to my contributors in this episode, Matt, Alexandra, and Bree. Again, I am your host, Dr. Jenny Rosier, and as always, you can find me on Instagram at Relationships Love Happiness, on Facebook and YouTube by searching for the Relationships Love Happiness Project, and on the web at www.relationshipslovehappiness.com. I hope you'll join me for episode 9, where I plan to talk about dismissive adult attachment. Thanks for listening.